Call the meeting to order. This is meeting number 4 of the Standing Committee on Finance. We are continuing our study with respect to retirement income security of Canadians. Colleagues, we have votes at 5:30, so we will have to leave here at 5:15. We also have a motion by Mr. McCallum, which I'm proposing we deal with at the end of the meeting, perhaps at 5 p.m. So we do have a shortened time, and I apologize for that to our witnesses ahead of time. We have with us a number of organizations and one individual here with us today. We have the Ontario Municipal Employees Retirement System. We have Air Canada component of the Canadian Union of Public Employees. We have the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board. We have the Canadian Bankers Association. We have the Canadian Life and Health Insurance Association Incorporated. And as an individual, we have Monsieur Jean-Pierre Laporte, lawyer. Welcome to all of you. We will begin with the Ontario Municipal Employment Retirement System, and if I can ask you to have presentations of between 5 to 7 minutes to allow for a lot of time for questions from members. So start, Ms. Brown, please.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be here today. I'm Jennifer Brown, Chief Pension Officer at OMERS Administration Corporation, which is responsible for OMERS investment, plan administration, and member services. OMERS also has a sponsors corporation, which is responsible for plan design, benefits, and contribution rates. With me today is Ian McEachran, our Director of Government Relations. OMERS is perhaps Canada's leading example of a successful multi-employer defined benefit plan, serving over 928 employers in municipalities, school boards, children's aid societies, police and fire departments, and other local agencies across Ontario. The multi-employer model pools costs and risks. On the other side of the table are 290,000 active members. Fully 1 out of every 20 people working in Ontario is an OMERS plan member. We currently provide pensions to more than 110,000 retirees. There are more than 40 umbrella groups representing OMERS unions and employee associations and over 600 locals. Our model was built from the bottom up, step by step, over a long period of time. OMERS has been jointly funded by employers and plan members since 1962. It has been jointly governed since 1968. OMERS is also a jointly sponsored pension plan. Under our model, employers and members have an equal voice at the boardroom table. They share direct responsibility for all major decisions and the plan's success. Broadly speaking, we conduct our pension and investment activities within the confines of both Ontario and federal pension and income tax legislation. Our job is to invest contributions and the investment income we generate to secure members' retirement benefits. OMERS highly skilled investment professionals manage over $47 billion in net investment assets that generate the income necessary to pay pensions. About 70% of pension costs are paid by investment returns, while the other 30% is shared through contributions by employers and members. One priority of our strategy is to organize long-term access to capital. This will enable us to acquire larger value investments that we would not otherwise acquire due to risk management considerations. The Ontario government expanded OMERS powers last year to enable us to offer investment and administration management services to a wide range of potential clients inside and outside of Canada, including public and private sector pension funds, governments and their agencies, corporations, colleges, universities and their endowments, and registered charities. The breadth of these legislative powers acknowledges our ability to deliver such services to others, but more importantly allows others the advantage we have in relation to plan administration capabilities and investments. During the course of the last 2 years, the adequacy of pension coverage has also become a high-profile political issue. Federal, provincial, and territorial finance ministers and first ministers have met several times and have made statements about pension coverage and retirement income issues. Ontario has made promises to consult on important changes to the pension system. Several provinces have already released consultation papers, and the federal government has announced spring consultations and a review of policy options at the May 2010 Finance Ministers' meeting. OMERS wishes to be an active contributor to the national debate on pension reform to the government-sponsored pillar of the pension system. Our interest in addressing these retirement and security issues is one of Canada's largest defined benefit plans, whose sponsors and members expect leadership from us on these policy considerations pertaining to pensions. It is our position that pension reform should provide competitive choice for those without coverage, and that changes to the system do not harm or undermine the current pension or retirement savings arrangements. We will continue to examine the current proposals for possible variations of the Canada Pension Plan and identify risks and benefits posed by each option. This is extremely useful and important public debate, and we applaud your committee's interest in addressing it. Thank you. We welcome your questions and comments within our remaining time, in particular to our view of competitive choice available to all Canadians.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brown. We'll now go to Ms. Thompson, please.
Hello, my name is Catherine Thompson. I'm the president of the Air Canada component of CUPE. I'm here with you today representing the 6,600 flight attendants who are employed by Air Canada. Our members participate in a defined benefit pension plan sponsored by Air Canada. It is regarding the state of this plan that I'm speaking with you today. Ours is not a profession that creates wealthy people. Our salaries are a reflection of our demographics. Given our limited ability to generate substantial savings during our careers, we rely on the security and stability of our pension plans to provide us with a dignified retirement. Air Canada's pension plans cover over 30,000 employees and retirees. Had these pension plans been terminated and wound up as of January 1st, 2009, employees and retirees would have received only 76% of their pension promise. While the plan's funding levels may have improved somewhat in the last year, despite the sacrifices that Air Canada's employees have made to protect our pension plans, the plans are still seriously underfunded. This places the plan participants, in our case predominantly women and minorities, at an unacceptable risk and clearly demonstrates the inability of the current federal pension regulatory system to protect plan members. Air Canada's pension experience should be a flashing warning sign for all of us. Air Canada's pension plans were threatened by the CCAA insolvency in 2003 and again during a second pension restructuring in 2009. In the 2003 CCAA, the normal PBSA funding rules were set aside for Air Canada and replaced with a weaker set of funding requirements. In 2009, Air Canada was unable to meet even these diluted requirements, and we faced another pension crisis and further pension restructuring. As a result of that restructuring, Air Canada is only required to protect against further deterioration in the plan funding until 2014. There is no prospect that the Air Canada plans will make any progress towards full funding before then. This is not acceptable for a private pension plan. The entire point of pension regulation is to ensure full pension protection regardless of the corporate sponsor's survival. Current regulations have failed the employees of Air Canada, and the fulfillment of Air Canada's pension promise is now contingent on the survival of the company. In retrospect, it's clear that Air Canada should have not only been allowed, but required to fund a cushion, as is standard in some European jurisdictions, and that Air Canada should not have been permitted to take contribution holidays during the good times. PBSA reforms have started to move in this direction, but this is too little, and hopefully, for Air Canada's plan members, not too late. The pension crisis that we've experienced at Air Canada presents learning opportunities for all of us. Our first lesson is that pension funding rules must be strictly applied and sufficiently rigorous as to protect pensions. They must be structured in a way that ensures that pension plans are cushioned against inevitable financial fluctuations. The only acceptable alternative to stricter funding regulations is, as the CLC suggests, a federally sponsored pension insurance program. Pension insurance, which already exists in the U.S., the U.K., and even closer to home in Ontario, would be funded through premiums paid by all plans and would ensure pension benefit protection in much the same way that other financial products, such as bank deposits and insurance annuities, are insured against corporate loss. A second lesson is that the task of providing adequate pensions has become onerous, even for large corporations like Air Canada. The CPP component of retirement income must be improved and the private pension share reduced. The cost of CPP funding would be shared across the widest possible base, making for the most secure possible benefit, ensuring that a company's bankruptcy wouldn't completely decimate an employee's retirement planning. In conclusion, we share the CLC's view that displacing a more significant share of our collective pension funding expense from workplace pension plans to the public sector will be good for Canadian corporate competitiveness and result in more secure pensions for Canadians. With these comments, I wish to close and thank the committee for its time and the invitation to address you.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. We'll now go to, is it Mr. Dale or Mr. Raymond? Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. My name is Don Raymond. I'm the Senior Vice President of Public Market Investments for the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board. It's nice to see you all again. With me today is my colleague, Mr. Dale, Senior Vice President of Communications and Stakeholder Relations. Thank you for inviting us to speak to you this afternoon. During the mid-1990s, the conversation in the Canadian pension industry and amongst policymakers focused on what was working and what was not. At that time, it was recognized that the Canada Pension Plan was not sustainable. With foresight, political courage, and ingenuity, Canada's provincial and federal governments worked together and took bold action to successfully reform the CPP. With input from contributors and beneficiaries, pension experts, employers, the labour movement, and academics, they crafted an enduring solution that ensures the sustainability of the Canada Pension Plan. Fast forward to today. The CPP is sound and sustainable for the Chief Actuary's 75-year review period and beyond. It is 10 years before the first dollar of investment income from the CPP fund is needed to help pay benefits, and CPP is viewed as a key part of the solution to increase retirement security, no longer as part of the problem. It is reassuring that a recent NANOS poll indicates that a majority of Canadians are confident in the capacity of the CPP, QPP to deliver on their pension commitment going forward. What is a concern is that less than half of Canadians in the 30 to 39 age group were confident or somewhat confident on this point, whereas almost 70% of Canadians over 60 were much more confident. Asked whether CPP, QPP would have to reduce payments in the future, 3/4 of respondents in the 30 to 39 age bracket thought this was likely or somewhat likely, while only 42% of respondents 60 or over thought so. Our takeaway from this is that many Canadians are still unaware that the CPP was reformed almost 15 years ago and are not aware of the plan's soundness or sustainability for generations to come. Changing the perception of the CPP is a significant opportunity for policymakers. Our role at the CPP Investment Board is to manage the CPP fund, but we believe that Canadians might make different financial choices if they better understood the sustainability of the CPP. But one thing is clear. Canadians can rest assured that the CPP will be there for them in their retirement and will deliver an important portion of their retirement income as intended. As a result, the CPP can and should be viewed as the cornerstone of retirement security for the 17 million Canadians who currently participate in the plan. Consider the attributes of the CPP. The CPP is a mandatory, contribution-financed, national defined benefit plan. These benefits are a stream of payments for life that are fully indexed and fully portable. Other advantages include the fact that risks are pooled with a large number of plan participants, the 17 million Canadians who are part of the CPP. And for the vast majority of Canadians, even if they have tax-assisted retirement savings, the CPP is the only access to an actual pension that they have. The Canada Pension Reform Model of 1996-97 and the CPP Investment Board are admired by national pension plans and pension funds around the world as an effective way to address struggling national retirement systems. Credit for this accomplishment belongs to policymakers. It is truly remarkable that the CPP, rightly judged to be in crisis 15 years ago, is now seen as part of the solution, and enhancements to the plan are under consideration. What we can do here today is share some of what we have learned from our experience of managing the CPP fund to help inform the debate currently underway across Canada and elsewhere in the world. The CPP Investment Board manages the assets of the fund not needed to pay current benefits, assets which do not belong to the government and are segregated from general tax revenues. It operates at arm's length from government, free from political involvement, and with a professional management organization accountable to a financially sophisticated board of directors. It has a singular commercial mandate to maximize investment returns without undue risk of loss, and it can invest with a high degree of certainty about the future cash inflows to the fund. And due to its partial funding structure, the fund has an effective amortization period of 75 years. The CPP Investment Board is a longer-term investor than almost all market participants. Our investment strategy is designed to perform over the long term to help sustain the CPP for 17 million Canadians over decades and generations. We manage the $124 billion fund with our investment horizon of 5, 10, and 20 years, and it is designed to deliver returns over decades. While we are encouraged by the stronger performance in 2009, it is performance over the long term that matters to the ongoing sustainability of the CPP. By staying the course with our long-term strategy, the CPP has benefited from the recent rebound in financial markets around the world. In 2009, we were able to capitalize on our structural advantages and internal expertise to complete significant investments Canada and globally. We expect that the investments we have been making during the past 12 months will be a strong source of investment income over the long term. We will maintain our strategic asset weighting of the portfolio and emphasize our strengths as a large long-term investor to capitalize on investment opportunities we see in current market conditions. In summary, we do not advocate any specific pension reform model, nor do we champion a specific proposal. Our role here in the pension system is to manage the funds that will help sustain the Canada Pension Plan as currently structured. Our sole focus is investing the assets of the CPP, and we have built an organization to handle the tremendous growth of the fund as it increases from $250 to $350 billion in the next decade. If policymakers decide to expand the CPP, we could, if asked, manage the additional assets. Or alternatively, a separate organization that reflects the proven model of the CPPIB model could also handle this. Thank you again for your invitation to participate today. We look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Raymond. We'll now go to the Canadian Bankers Association.
Merci et bon après-midi.
Thank you and good afternoon. We would like to thank the Chair and members of the committee for the opportunity to provide our perspectives on Canada's retirement savings system. With me today is my colleague, Marion Robel, the CBA's Director of Market and Regulatory Developments. We also submitted last November a report that deals with the issue and includes new research we've undertaken on the household savings of Canadians. And we have copies of the report with us today.
Of Canadians' retirement savings as providers of savings retirement vehicles, sponsors of defined benefit pension plans, providers of advice to Canadians throughout their financial life cycles. Our members have been actively exploring ways to strengthen Canada's retirement savings systems, and we put some of those ideas into the report that we've brought forward to you today. I want to make 4 key points today. First, how and why Canadian families save has many and varied aspects to it, and these change over the course of a family's life cycle. There's sometimes a tendency when looking at this issue to focus exclusively on pension or registered plan participation as the only measures of financial security, whereas in fact there are a range of ways that Canadians prepare for retirement. Our concern is that a one-size-fits-all approach may not be effective in addressing the actual savings needs of Canadians. In fact, it could have unintended consequences. For instance, by by simply shifting existing savings from one pot to another without actually increasing savings, which has to be the goal. Second, there are a number of concerns that we feel policymakers would need to very carefully consider before embarking on any new public plan. Some have suggested, for instance, creating a new supplemental defined contribution plan. Some questions that occur to us about that we think need to be addressed is, well, for instance, how would Canadians get advice on the investment decisions they would have to make when contributing to a public supplemental plan? Also, as we've just heard, Canadians have very clear expectations about the Canada Pension Plan. It's a defined benefit plan. It has known payouts at retirement. I guess the issue is who would address the expectations and potential confusion among Canadians regarding the unknown future payouts of a new government-created defined contribution plan. What would a new plan do to the incentives for private sector employers to establish or even retain their own pension plans for employees? It's questions like these that need to be very carefully considered as we all go through this process. The third point I wanted to raise is that we believe that the current retirement savings systems in Canada is not broken. Quite the opposite. It is a strong and functioning system, but it is in need of improvements. If our collective goal is to strengthen Canadians' financial security, it may be more effective for governments in Canada to work together to improve the tax-assisted system that we already have, rather than create a new public system, a new public plan that would duplicate infrastructure already in place. In our report, which we provided to you, we make a number of recommendations that would make our already good retirement savings system even better. For example, the law, in our view, should allow for pension plans that are delinked from the employment relationship, to allow for plans to be open to a wider range of membership. Such plans could offer small businesses effective alternatives to setting up their own plans, and also could be available to self-employed individuals, so that more people could participate in pension plans and save. In addition, rules regarding the tax-assisted private savings system should also be improved. For instance, by creating a lifetime ceiling on tax-free retirement savings instead of annual limits. And by the way, in terms of the tax-assisted savings system, we need to look no further than the tax-free savings account for an example of how a well-designed, tax-assisted vehicle can be both popular and effective in helping Canadians save. And in terms of steps that we all still need to take, there's also the question of the need for enhanced financial literacy as it relates to savings and retirement planning. And we certainly support the government's efforts through the Financial Literacy Task Force. The fourth and final point that I'd like to make is that the adequacy of retirement savings is a national issue and requires national public policy solutions. In financial policy matters generally, and in retirement savings matters specifically, fragmentation, in our view, across the country will ultimately hurt rather than help Canadians. I look forward to your questions, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Campbell. We'll now go to Monsieur Laporte, s'il vous plaît.
Good afternoon. My name is Jean-Pierre Laporte. I'm a lawyer practicing exclusively in the field of pensions and benefits in the City of Toronto. I have been actively involved in pension reform issues since 2003 and have published a number of articles in this area. Some of you may be familiar with one particular policy idea I first proposed in 2004, calling for the creation of a supplemental Canada pension plan. That solution was meant to deal with the issue of inadequate pension coverage in Canada in the private sector. And I would be happy to discuss this concept during the question period. The Standing Committee on the Status of Women has received my testimony as part of its study on women and pensions, and I would direct you to that comprehensive House of Commons study and its reports for additional background information. My goal today, however, is to present this committee with some information on pension adequacy from an international perspective. While I realize that some of the speakers you have invited will only present will present on this topic at later sessions, in my view, the committee would benefit from beginning its study by looking at the international arena before getting too bogged down in Canadian or provincial details. International comparisons provide a useful benchmark to gauge the performance of our own system, and it highlights the design features that differentiate us from our peer nations. So I think it's fair to say that the fundamental question that most decision makers should ask themselves is simple. Do Canadians have enough to live on in old age? But of whom are we talking about? The self-employed individual, federal civil servants, farmers, homemakers, the recently arrived immigrant? Depending on the category one looks at, our fundamental question generates different answers. And yet, there is still some merit in asking the global questions. Do Canadians as a whole have enough to retire on? So this brings me to a very high level international statistics that have been collected by the OECD and that I have distributed to the members of this committee. As you all know, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development tries to provide standardized statistical information to enable useful international comparisons. I'm no statistician, and I cannot verify the accuracy of the data provided by them, by this organization, but like most Canadians, I surmise that someone more qualified than me has taken the time to ensure that these statistics are of some utility and may be relied upon to some extent. So what does the OECD tell us about Canada's ability to provide financial support for its senior citizens once they leave the workforce? The key statistic that I think is important that I want to bring to your attention today is the net income replacement ratio provided by pension plans for someone earning the average industrial wage in their home country. Now, that information is available on the OECD website, and I can provide that information to the clerk of the committee, but I think it's on the materials that I provided. Now, just by way of disclaimer, while the OECD data set in questions has information about all the OECD members, I've only extracted data for the top 14 countries with the highest net replacement ratios. And this is 2006 data, the most recent data that I found available on the website. And when we look at the ranking, the Netherlands ranked number 1 at 103% of pre-retirement income, and Canada is ranked number 12 at 57.6%, 0.86%. And there are a bunch of countries in between that have fairly high ratios. Denmark, 91%, Austria, 90%, Italy, 74%, and so forth. This bird's eye view look at how much pre-retirement income is replaced by pension sources is interesting in many respects. First of all, it puts into perspective the claims that some have made that our pension system is a world leader and that there's no real need to reform anything. When all the rhetoric is said and done, the numbers don't lie. Secondly, on an aggregate level, it demonstrates that we have quite a bit of work to accomplish if we want, as a nation, to provide the kind of income replacement ratios that some smaller economies have already been able to achieve. What the statistic doesn't tell us is whether Canadians are replacing enough income to live well into old age. Nor does it tell us who is covered and who isn't. Nor does it provide any detail as to whether the national pension system in the country is sustainable or affordable. What it does do, though, is to provide a rough idea of how successful we have been as a nation to provide post-retirement income to those citizens of ours who earn the average industrial wage. My own assessment is that while some of us have excellent pension plans and can look to the future with a lot of confidence, the millions of Canadians with no pension savings or inadequate financial resources are dragging our national average down, and that there is much work to be done. Thank you for your invitation to Ottawa.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Our last presenter will be the Canadian Life and Health Insurance Association Incorporated.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Dean Connor. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Sun Life Financial, and it's my pleasure to be here today on behalf of the Canadian Life and Health Insurance Association, along with Frank Swetloff, the President of the Association. The Canadian life and health industry commends the Standing Committee for its focus on retirement income security. We very much share your interests. This is an area that is highly meaningful to our customers, about 26 million Canadians who rely on us for financial security, whether it be through life and health insurance or lifetime income solutions that we offer through pensions, annuities, RRSPs, and RIFs. Over two-thirds of Canada's pension plans are administered by the industry.
As industry representatives, we have thought about these issues at length and have dealt not only with what we could do to serve our clients and adapt to their changing needs, but also on the role and our contribution to Canada's social fabric. Today, our presentation will mainly deal with the state of retirement income savings.
Melbourne Mercer Global Pension Index, Canada's global retirement savings system, Canada's retirement savings system has only three peers: Australia, the Netherlands, and Sweden. This success has been predicated on the complementary relationship between government and private plans. And in this regard, we often talk about the three pillars of retirement savings. The government, of course, makes up the first two pillars with old age security, GIS, and the Canada and Quebec pension plans. It's our view that the role of the government in Canada's retirement savings system should be to ensure that all Canadians receive a level of income that meets their basic needs in retirement. We believe that these first two pillars, the public part of our retirement savings system, are working well. The third pillar is a combination of workplace pensions and other retirement plans, individual RRSPs, and individual savings. And this third pillar is meant to provide a level of income adequacy that goes beyond the basics. Structurally, we have a healthy third pillar. There are a wide range of products available through a wide range of providers. It's a very competitive marketplace. There are strong tax incentives. But many Canadians are not sufficiently engaged, and some are not engaged at all. And sometimes this is by choice, and sometimes it's through a lack of access. When it comes to workplace retirement plans, there's a fair bit of inconsistency that breaks down between the public and private sectors and between large and small employers. About 8 million workers out of a total workforce of 14 million have access to some kind of workplace pension plan. 5 million are covered by defined benefit or DB plans. About 1.3 million Canadians are covered by workplace defined contribution plans, and 2 million are covered by workplace group RRSPs, which are less administratively complex than DC plans. In the public sector, 90% of workers are covered by workplace retirement plans, and these are usually DB. When it comes to the private sector, however, only 50% of workers have access to some kind of workplace retirement plan. In the private sector, there is a shift underway, and it's been going on for many years, from DB plans to DC plans or group RRSPs. This is, in fact, a global shift, and it's driven by funding costs, it's driven by the risks and the complexities of DB plans that make them increasingly challenging for employers to sponsor. The insurance industry believes there are reasonable steps that can go a long way to improving our retirement savings system. And we join in others first in believing there should be a good look at the rules around RRSPs. We believe that expanding the definition of earned income to capture such things as royalties and active business income would be more inclusive of self-employed Canadians. In addition, extending the age at which Canadians must start withdrawing their RRSPs and other pension vehicles from 71 to 73 would allow those who are still working to continue to build up their retirement savings. Some countries have gone further. For example, in the UK, pensions don't need to be started until age 75. A second area that we believe could make a huge difference to Canadians is improving access to workplace pensions. The main impediments for employers right now are costs and administrative complexities, and this is especially so for small employers. We recommend that governments allow multi-employer pension plans that are set up as DC plans or DC MEPs, whereby a regulated financial institution acts as the sponsor and administrator, and any employer may join. It spares the employer almost all of the administrative costs and compliance burdens except for payroll deductions. And because multiple employers could participate in the same plan, there would be significant economies of scale. Employees would be automatically enrolled, but would be permitted to opt out. As well, legislation should permit auto-escalation, where a plan could start members out at a base contribution rate with an automatic increase in subsequent years until the desired target level of contribution was reached. And employers could match employee contributions or choose not to contribute. For those employers who offer group RRSPs, a current impediment to maximizing retirement savings is that contributions to these plans are not locked in for retirement, but in fact can be withdrawn. We recommend that employer contributions to group RRSPs be locked in to ensure they are meeting the objective of providing retirement income. All of these changes to private pensions, auto-enrollment, auto-escalation, multi-employer plans, locking in employer contributions to group RRSPs are relatively simple and positive steps forward that would build up our third pillar of retirement savings in a way that few would oppose. And I'll wrap up with a few last comments by saying while the life and health insurance industry supports the public system for providing a basic level of pension, it does not support massive new government-run programs. Whether these programs are a DC top-up to the CPP-QPP or a whole new government-sponsored plan, in our view, such plans would only replicate what is already done in the private sector. In view of the life and health insurance industry, then, in summary, we have a structure of saving for retirement that is sound, is internationally recognized as such. What we need to do is find mechanisms to allow more Canadians to take advantage of what's already available. Our proposals to free up the RRSP market and to make workplace retirement plans more accessible to workers, we think, are the best way to achieve those objectives. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. We'll start with Mr. McCallum for 7 minutes for questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Writing down the time here. And thank you to all the witnesses. First of all, we all like to think Canada's leading in everything, but we also should be realistic. So I thought Mr. Laporte's analysis was interesting, that in terms of coverage ratios, we're 12th in the OECD, we're the middle of the G7. Nothing to be terribly boastful about, and I'm directing this to Ted Menzies. And it does show there's more work to be done, which underlines the importance of these hearings. My first question to either Ian Dale or Donald Raymond, when you say the CPP pension reform model of 1996-7 and the CPP Investment Board are admired by national pension plans and pension funds around the world, etc., credit for this accomplishment belongs to policymakers. Can you just remind us which policymakers at the federal level you have in mind?
Well, I think as people would remember, it was a federal-provincial reform model that took place in 95, 96, and 97. So it was a combination of 11 federal and provincial governments across the country of all political stripes.
All right. I guess we can draw between the lines on our own. But turning to a more serious issue, we in the Liberal Party have come out in favor of a supplementary Canada pension plan, and I noticed that both the insurance companies and the Banking Association opposed that. And so we were driven to that partly because the management fees charged for the management of funds by the private sector are 2 or 3 percentage points per year, depending on the asset class, and said to be amongst the highest in the OECD. Whereas under a public pension system like the Canada Pension Plan, It's a small fraction of that costs. So one of the drivers towards the Supplementary Canada Pension Plan is the very high cost charged by the private sector. And so when the private sector says, don't worry, don't duplicate us, the point is that our vehicle that we are proposing would be at a very much lower cost to Canadians than the private sector is currently charging. And so my basic question, and I'd like to ask both the Bankers Association and the life insurers, is why can't we do both? We are proposing a Supplementary Canada Pension Plan. You don't like that because it competes with yours. You are proposing, as you say here, and both of you said something similar, to allow pension plans that are delinked from the employment relationship and allow for multi-sponsor or third-party plans open to wider range of membership. Now, the bankers propose that, the life insurers propose that. I have nothing against that. You're allowed already under an Ontario pension plan law, life insurers are, to manage such pension plans. But if there are impediments to those, I think we should remove them. But my point is, why not let a thousand flowers bloom? Why not allow more choice to consumers? Have a Supplementary Canada Pension Plan with which the private sector would have to compete, and have multi-employer pension plans with which the public sector would have to compete. Why do you insist on cutting off additions to the public sector pension plan and having exclusively private? Why can't we have a mix of both and give Canadians a broader range of choice?
Okay, start with Mr. Campbell. Do you want to start?
Sure. I guess what I would say, let me just sort of clarify. I think our position on the idea of a supplementary pension plan is, I'd characterize it more as look before you leap, and let's make sure before anybody makes decisions to go down that road that all the questions are answered. Now,
questions, but I don't have much time, and I want to give Mr. Connor a chance too.
Yeah. I guess
why can't we have both options for Canadians?
Well, I guess one of the issues, and I'll turn to my colleagues and my friends in the life insurance industry. I guess one of the issues is this: if we haven't seen the details of what, like, an actual worked out plan, and our concern would be that if you put in place, in effect, what would look like what would be a new government plan that has automatic enrollment, what are the unintended consequences that would have for the incentives of private sector companies to say, well, why should we have to put in place anything for our own employees? We'll just opt into that. You then get towards a monopoly situation. Now, maybe there's ways that can be corrected. I think our point is that you've got in place now a well-functioning third pillar. That should be the first place where you should look at it. I think that it's going to take probably a generation, Mr. McCallum, before we could see what the outcomes of a new government plan would be, good or bad.
Okay.
But we can make some fixes now.
Okay. Well, I guess based partly on Mr. Laporte's analysis and other analyses I have read suggesting that the pension system is in need of repair on a fairly urgent basis, I don't think we really have a generation to wait. But perhaps I can turn the same question over to Mr. Connor as to why specifically can we not have more choice for Canadian consumers by allowing both your preferred option, a multi-employer pension plan, and an expansion of the Canada Pension Plan, and the two can compete with each other and provide more choice to Canadians?
We've got about a minute, Mr. Connor.
Let me clarify that your point around the fees. I would observe that in the large end of the Canadian life and health insurance pension market, the fees are indeed very competitive. So we're talking fees in the 60 to 70 basis points for record keeping and investments, and these benchmark against favorably against the most competitive nation in the world, just to the south of us, which has a 401k industry that's 20 times larger. So this proposal to allow smaller employers to build up into a larger plan will indeed, and it's encouraging to hear the idea of knocking down the impediments, will indeed provide Canadians with access to very cost-effective pensions that the largest of Canadian employers enjoy today through DC plans. Specific to the question of could you have a Canada pension plan alongside that, clearly the answer is yes. Our concern with that is setting, when you look around the world, the activity to set those up. And if you look at the UK as a good example, it's costing the nation $50 million a year. It started in 2003, and I think it'll be implemented in a phased-in basis starting in 2013 or 2014. So I would just simply say time and money.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Mr.
I
McCallum,
would
you're,
just observe that the
Mr.
Canada
McCallum,
Pension
you're
Plan
well, Mr.
Investment Board.
McCallum, sorry, you're well over time here. Okay, thank you. We will have another round for the Liberal Party. Monsieur Payet, pour 7 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. Payet, 7 minutes. I would like to thank the witnesses for appearing, especially those who have made the effort to speak in French, even though it's not your mother tongue. I would first like to speak to the people from representing Air Canada employees. I say that, unfortunately, you're the example of an employer who has abandoned you and on 2 occasions has used legislation not to contribute to a plan, has used its possibility to use a tax holiday, and has and so you're trying to look for a landing from the federal government. Do you believe that the solution that we've seen in Quebec, that is to allow the QPP to incorporate those pension plans that are with employers that are bankrupt, could be a solution? And while you're thinking about your answer, I would like to ask a question to the CPP Investment Board. I'm glad that you said that in 2010 you have encouraging results, because 2009 was, you showed a minus 18 return. Do you think that even with the capitalization that you have over a 75 period, which is clearly a very long period, as you've said, it's a different capitalization system, would you be in a position to administer funds such as the funds from Air Canada, which could be in a position of financial difficulty? Would it be possible for you to step up to the plate as the Caisse de dépôt has done in Quebec with other employer and employee funds?
Shot at capturing what you were asking me. If I get it wrong, please correct me. So during the speech that I made, I referenced the fact that the entire point of pension regulation is to ensure that members who participate in a pension plan are not then reliant on the survivability of their corporation in order to, have that pension promise kept. In the case of Air Canada, the pension holidays that they took were allowed by pension legislation. It's many of our members believe that somehow Air Canada didn't abide by the rules and wasn't contributing to pension. They contributed exactly what legislation provided for them to contribute. Unfortunately, it's legislation that has failed the employees of Air Canada. And hopefully the sessions that are taking place today will rectify that situation.
Okay, with respect to the second part of that question about the CPP Investment Board managing the assets of distressed pension funds, clearly that's not part of our mandate today. There is a process to change our mandate. That would require building some additional capabilities, which, if asked to do, we would be prepared to do. We think it would be important, if that were the choice, to point out that it for the purposes of cost accountability, it would make sense to try and keep the costs in managing the CPP assets separate from the costs in managing those other assets.
Selon la même logique, est-ce que les gens...
According to the same logic, do people from OMERS, because you say that you've seen a growth in powers to be able to solicit clients outside of Ontario, outside of Canada even. Now I'm referring to what the Caisse de dépôt has done in the 1990s in Quebec, because it launched a broadening of its operations, and the results of that were rather unsatisfactory. But could you, rather than providing services across the globe, to provide services to pension plans or companies that are distressed or in insolvency situation? Do you think that OMERS could specialize in that field and increase its clientele in that regard?
My report has the ability to do third-party fund management and third-party administration for all types of pensions plans in Canada, and we are currently building that infrastructure in order to be able to deliver on that.
Dernier élément.
Last question, Mr. Chair. For the CBA, you indicated at the start of your presentation that you were afraid that there would be a transfer from one vehicle to another, rather than to address the capacity of Canadians to increase their savings. Do you believe that the TIFSA is an interesting avenue, and to removing the $5,000 limit with the TIFSA in order to create to generate more savings? And a sub-question, in your fourth element, you said we don't want a fragmented solution. What do you mean by that, especially since, take the example of Quebec, Canada, where there are already well-developed and well-managed pension plans both in Quebec and Canada, but these are two very different types of management. I will have to answer that in English, I'm sorry.
Say on the worry about solutions, unless they're very carefully defined here, could result in just shifting the savings from one pot to another. When we looked at the issue, and I'll come to the TIFSA in just a moment, when we looked at the issue, we did some examination of Statistics Canada data on the financial security of households. And we looked over the whole life cycle. Now, as you know, I mean, the financial needs of families change dramatically over time. And if there's a solution that's put in place that has, for instance, mandatory or virtually mandatory contribution requirements that are imposed upon people at a certain point of their lives, let's say younger people, who need their lower levels of income to apply to, household needs and, building up this kind of asset and that asset. The concern is, unless it's very carefully thought through, you could actually be working against their interests. So that's just one of the issues.
Okay, just very quickly, Mr.
On the national solutions, let me go. We like the TIFSA. It's a new program. It's going to take some time to see how it works out, but our sense is it's very popular and it's very flexible, which is good. In terms of the national approaches, we would be distressed if we saw in individual provinces kind of a blossoming of different kinds of plans, because it would give rise to mobility issues, comparability issues, and that sort of thing. We're not calling for a particular national solution in terms of a model, but a national approach where all parties, we think that is a much better approach.
Okay, thank you. Merci. We'll go to Mr. Wallace, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank the panelists for coming today. I do want to make a point, Mr. Chairman, that this is a large panel and very important topic, and I think from my perspective we may want to call some of these witnesses back, and in future I'd prefer smaller panels so we have more time to ask questions. I have provided the CPPIB the questions that I have here, and I have a large number of questions, and I would like to see them responded to all of committee in writing by April 12th, if possible. And that might require you to come back and defend those answers that you put forward. But I am going to read into the record so my colleagues on the other side know what I'm interested in. And some of you have broached that subject already. So one question is with respect to the idea that the voluntary supplementary CPP, which we've heard about, is the CPPIB currently equipped to run and expand a voluntary or mandatory system as outlined in some of the recent proposals? How long would it take for CPPIB to build the infrastructure to run such a system? And how many more employees would the CPPIB require, in your estimation? What advantages to clients would voluntary CPP-run system offer compared to the private financial institutions? What risk would taxpayers not contributing to the voluntary CPP system be exposed to? Does the current CPP outperform market offerings? And we heard a little bit about that. Could a voluntary CPP supplement confidently be expected to achieve the same overperformance or performance levels? Would a voluntary CPP preserve the administrative cost advantage now enjoyed, which we've heard about, by the current mandatory CPP? In addition to that, following up on Mr. Pellet's, I'm not sure if I pronounced it right, but questioning, is the CPPIB currently equipped to take on distressed private sector pension plans? And I think you commented briefly on that. And how long would it take for the CPPIB to build the infrastructure to take on such plans? And how many more employees would the CPPIB require? And finally, what risks would be borne by taxpayers if the CPPIB were mandated to take the guardianship of distressed pension plans? Now, there's a lot of questions, but I think in general it's what we're hearing from others, and not just from the opposition benches, but from other people who have come forward last week and previously when we had some brief discussion of pensions earlier in the fall, that a voluntary program run by the CPPIB is an option. But I think there's a lot of questions, and we don't have, this isn't a 4 or 5 hour discussion. We only have a few minutes, actually. So I would prefer that we all would get those answers. It'll have to be in both English and French. And that way we'll have a proper discussion. And
They can comment. You've got 4 minutes to respond.
I'm going to let them comment. But that way we'll have a proper discussion based on the information. If you'd like to pick one, because before I'm done, I have one other question of our life insurance friends. But if you'd like to pick one you'd like to comment on that, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you. Be pleased to answer that question. So there are a range of questions there, as you say. I think the way to look at it is that there is a range of complexity there. So currently we are an investment management organization asked to look after one single pool of capital. As you add complexity onto that, we are generally not set up to do that at the moment. If the 10 stewards of the CPP, the federal and provincial governments, decided to give us additional powers, we could certainly do that. I think as you get into each of these things, as the complexity grows, the degree of difficulty grows. One of the things that we have right now is a very simple and powerful mandate, which is to maximize returns without undue risk of loss for 17 million Canadians and fund those future pensions.
These questions are designed to get you, whether I'm sure you have as an organization, but thinking about that if as policymakers we're going to head that way, what is the actual ramifications? And this gives you an opportunity to put that in writing for us. I appreciate that. Okay. My final question is for our life insurance friends, and that is just because I don't know, the multi-employer pension plan that you're recommending as an option, does it exist already in this jurisdiction, other jurisdictions? And do you have any sense of limits in terms of how many employers can be involved in that kind of issue, or do they have to be solvent and all those kinds of things? Just tell me a little bit about the plan, because I don't know anything about it.
Well, the multi-employer pension plan model actually exists today in Canada, but to join it, you have to be affiliated with the other employers. So, for example, in the construction industry, you'll have a number of standalone companies able to join this MEP because they all happen to be part of that particular industry. But if this company that makes auto parts wants to join in with a company that is a wholesaler of food, today they cannot join. There are limitations in the law to allowing them to join together into a common plan. The DC MEP is a plan where individuals have their own account balance. And so the plan is always fully funded. It's whatever they happen to have in their account balance that they and possibly their employer have put in. and if they leave that plan, it's portable in the sense that if they leave that company, it's portable in the sense that they can just leave their money there and move from company to company. So it's simple. It's it's meant to drive down cost by taking advantage of the economies of scale that are inherent in the business, and there's really no risk to the employers who participate in that multi-employer plan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Wallace. We'll go, Mr. Marston. You have 7 minutes, please.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I've been outside of this hallowed place for 26 meetings listening to very ordinary Canadians, people without necessarily having any real expertise in pensions. But one of the things that came to light, you talked about the 3 pillars. Well, those on defined contribution or with RRSPs are in serious trouble right now, and but I won't go deeper into that. My question will be for Mr. Raymond. Mr. Campbell, I agree with you about the fragmentation of how we address this. But one of the propositions that the NDP has put forward is calling for the doubling of CPP, and of course that's going to be amortized over a long period of time before we accomplish it. But increasing the benefits, I think the maximum today is $907 a month to $1,814, to form a base to strengthen that one pillar of the 2 pillars of the public plans. We understand that there's about 60-some% of working Canadians, both public and private in total, who have no savings and no pensions at all. So I'd like your comment on that. And then if I could, Ms. Thompson, I'd like to talk to you for a moment about the fact that the NDP has a bill C-476, and Air Canada went through CCAA, and we're seeking to have preferred status given to pensions in both CCAA and BIA. I'd like your comments on that, please.
Sir, could you just repeat what you'd like me to comment on?
The facility that we're talking about in the sense of doubling CPP, we're not talking about a supplemental plan. We're talking about doubling it. Our estimations that we've been told is about a 2.5% increase in premiums for employers and the same amount for the employees. It would be a mandatory plan, but that would form the basis of a floor that we could build on and raise people up.
Okay. So clearly, as I said in my opening remarks, these are all decisions for policymakers to make. As my colleague said, there's a range of options on the table. The one that is the simplest, in fact, for us to manage would be something along those lines, where it is essentially a single pool of assets. There might be some differentiation between the 2 components of it, because one would be fully funded and the other is related to the existing CPP. But on the spectrum, that would be the easiest for us to manage. I would say that, or as I said in my opening remarks, we're building the capabilities to manage $250 to $350 billion over the next 10 years. That would accelerate that somewhat, but in general terms, we are heading in that direction already.
Well, obviously, we'd only be able to roll out the increases over a extended period of time.
Right.
But we wouldn't have, as Mr. Wallace's questions implied, there a growing bureaucracy or a cost to the Canadian people. Thank you.
That's right.
Mr. Marston, I can tell you that the Air Canada component of QP and the flight attendants would certainly support this initiative put forth by the NDP. We sought this during this summer's pension reform. When we had to agree to major concessions virtually in our pension regulations, we did ask for preferred status. And given the financial situation that Air Canada was facing, we were unable to negotiate that due to the fact that part of Air Canada's survival was the raising of capital. And unfortunately, when you put a pension plan ahead of creditors, it becomes challenging to raise capital. So, but we certainly do support your initiative on this.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, Ms. Brown, if I could ask you a question. I understand that OMERS has decided to change its asset mix with a little bit more risk than in the past. I'm just surprised to hear that, and I was wondering what has motivated that.
Certainly that's not my understanding in terms of taking on more risk. I think our asset mix changes move us more into the private markets, infrastructure, real estate. So we're shifting that so that we have long-term stable returns.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, that's fine. I'm pretty well finished.
Okay.
I'd just like to thank this committee, being an outsider and a guest here today. I had made the suggestion to Mr. Mulcair that he asked the committee to take a look at pensions, and I'm really very pleased, and I want to thank the folks that have shown up here. You've provided good information. I'm looking forward to the answers that Mr. Wallace is seeking as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marston. We'll go to Mr. McKay, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, witnesses. I think what drives this conversation currently has to do with situations such as Air Canada, such as Nortel, such as looking at a lot of the ratios and the private plans, particularly the employer-sponsored plans, which are in difficulty. Even after the recovery of the market, they're still in difficulty. And so one of the suggestions, particularly put forward by our party, has been, if you will, a supplemental CPP plan. So Mr. Campbell raises some interesting questions. By the way, Mr. Raymond and Mr. Dale, it's nice to talk to you about something other than our usual favorite subject. But let me just go through Mr. Campbell's questions and see what your response might be. He asked, how would Canadians get advice on the investment decisions they'll have to make about contributing to a supplemental plan? My question on the question would be, why would Canadians get advice if, in fact, it's simply a contribution plan that you would make your contribution off your paycheck or whatever on a monthly or a weekly basis? Why would it involve advice at all?
Is the question?
No, I'll direct it to Mr. Raymond first, and then Mr. Campbell could respond.
Sorry, I don't follow the question.
Well, Mr. Maybe I'll get Mr.
My question.
It says, how would Canadians get advice on the investment decisions they'll have to make about contributing to a supplemental plan? That's his question.
Well, he's referring to a defined contribution plan.
Yeah, that's right. So this would be the additional plan that we're talking about.
I think that's a valid question.
It is a valid question, but it's a valid question for both of you. So Mr. Campbell has raised it, but CPP would be the one that would have to, in effect, answer it. So he's asking how would Canadians get advice on the investment decisions they would make on a defined contribution plan? Or would they?
Well, I think, you know, the way we are currently set up, we're not equipped to do that. That would be a significant departure for us should policymakers ask us to do that kind of thing. We're currently not set up to do that.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you that it's an unnecessary question. But let me just turn it back to Mr. Campbell for a second, just so that we can generate some debate here. Yeah.
The whole point is that many of these supplemental plans, they are defined contribution plans, not defined benefit. With a defined benefit plan like the CPP, there's really no need for advice because there's no decision making on the part of the individual investor. When an individual investor is contributing to a defined contribution plan, that investor is taking on all the investment risk. It's taking on a bunch of other risk. The investor needs advice.
But aren't we, in fact, proposing a hybrid of that? That it is a defined contribution plan, but in fact the investor doesn't make any decisions with respect to the investment.
Well, you're putting an investor in the position where he or she is, again, subject to all kinds of risk, and then you're saying they have they don't make any decision making. So what happens if they put in a portfolio, it turns out to be far riskier than they wanted it to be, or they thought it was going to be, or they thought that they've got a supplemental Canada pension plan, which is a defined benefit plan. They find they're not going to get nearly as much as they thought, and they had no access to advice.
So if the rules are clear going in that this is a defined contribution plan, it's managed as a pooled plan, much like Canada Pension Plan is managed now, that there is no request for or they're not set up to give advice, I'm hard-pressed to see where the problem is.
Well, the problem is that many of the proponents of these supplemental plans also are advocating for automatic enrollment. So individuals are going to find themselves, they're not making the decision to invest and to belong to these pension plans. Someone is making that decision for them. They are bearing all the risk. They may not understand what it is, and that's why they need advice.
I think if I could just add on to what Mr. Robles said there, in a defined benefit plan, as you know, whether or not your returns are adequate for the payout at the time, there is that defined payout that you know you're going to get.
I understand that. Yeah. What currently exists is a defined benefit plan. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. This, and your contribution to that defined benefit plan is the contribution. Why couldn't a defined contribution plan have similarly, this is a defined contribution plan, you contribute your money, and however it turns out is however it turns out.
However it turns out. I think one of the problems is, I think it comes down to the expectation of Canadians. If governments put in place a defined contribution plan, my sense is a lot of Canadians are going to say, oh, thank goodness, government's taking care of it, it's all done, I'll have a set payout. And then at the time when they come to collect on the retirement, they say, oh, this isn't anywhere near what I thought it was. Why didn't somebody tell me? This is the Canada Pension Plan.
Okay.
And that's the issue there, I think.
Thank you, Mr. McKay. You have Mr. Carrier.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is to Ms. Thompson. Given that we're discussing the whole issue of insecurity experienced by people with regard to their retirement plans, I think the people from QP, the Air Canada component, are living that insecurity. And I see in their presentation that they're suggesting that there be a retirement insurance, which you say already exists in the U.S. and the UK and in Ontario. I didn't hear other witnesses talk about that possibility, that is to create an insurance fund for retirement plans. So it could be interesting to hear perhaps the reaction of Mr. Connor, who represents life and health insurance companies. What is his opinion about creating such an insurance fund to assure the value of pension plans?
Safety nets that are referred to in Ontario and the United States and in other places have been put in with the very best intentions. In practice, it's been a very big challenge to make them work successfully. And so, for example, every time a large employer is on the brink of bankruptcy and it threatens to wipe out the Pension Guarantee Fund, you've seen governments, the province of Ontario, the government of the United States, have to step in and take other measures because the collapse of a large plan would completely wipe out the relatively small safety net fund that has been established. So I would say the actual experience with these safety net funds has been challenging. For them to work properly would require very high tolls paid by the other pension sponsors, higher than what anybody has been willing to charge today. So I think that's the nub of the issue.
I find that unfortunate because we still have a system where we believe that the private corporation is more effective than the government with regard to the financial management. And now we come to the conclusion that private funds basically aren't more secure than they are. Ms. Thompson, you confirmed in an earlier answer that your situation with Air Canada isn't unique. Probably the situation is created with the legislation that's in place. That you answered earlier that it's not only because of the legislation that was in place that you have the situation, but you have a situation with Nortel as well. So you would increase the value of public pension plans in order to ensure greater assurance for employees. Now, that's my understanding of what you've said. So that would ensure perhaps more safety. So you say we have to increase public pension plans. So this is something that you would be looking for.
And I apologize that I can't respond to you in French. We believe that sharing the pension responsibility over as large a base as possible offers the most security for our members. So that's why we support that initiative. And our members can't be entirely reliant on corporate goodwill or sense of responsibility anymore. Unfortunately, the markets have been very harsh on pension plans. And as we said, even with a company the size of Air Canada, the dips in the pension fund have made it that there's no way that they can be funded by the corporation themselves. So that's where we believe the pension insurance would be a viable option, and we're happy to provide the committee with further information on that.
Okay.
Okay.
Merci.
Ouais, ça va?
Ça va?
Ouais.
Okay. Merci, Monsieur Carrier. Madame Bloch.
Thank you, Mr. Carrier. Ms. Bloch.
Thank you for being here with us today. My questions are for the Canadian Bankers Association, and I know you're way down at the end of my side of the table, so I may not be able to make eye contact with you the whole time. I appreciated reading your report, Modernizing Canada's Retirement Saving Systems, and the complexities that you identified through this study on pension reform. I also appreciated that you submitted it to the committee so that we can continue to study it. Reading from that report, you note that there are no simple one-size-fits-all solutions, and I appreciated that you reiterated that comment today. On, I believe it's page 7 of your report, you also stress the need for coordinated action by governments across Canada. The adequacy of retirement savings is a national issue and requires national public policy solutions that will enhance the ability of individual Canadians to save. Is it still your view that any changes should be coordinated with cooperation among all levels of government? And can you expand on what some of those changes might be?
Sure. We think that we're very supportive of the discussions that have been going on among at the federal level and the provincial level, because the great danger, as I was saying earlier this afternoon, is that you will have a fragmented approach, because we are one country, and we need to, the retirement savings needs, don't vary materially from coast to coast, and we would worry about plans that might be developed that would have mobility concerns of people. We're a very mobile population, and you'd have, people move from province to province. They would expect the portability of their pension. I think one of the biggest issues that I would want to flag in answer to your question, there's a lot of commentary being made that, defined benefit plans, while sort of the very good gold standard, are in decline. And I think there's a lot of tendency to say, well, that's kind of irreversible, and that's too bad. We think this is a very good kind of pension plan, and it is hampered by the fact that there is a lack of harmony among the provinces and jurisdictions across this country. And as we say in our report on page 7, as you note, that one of the things that I think would reduce costs, particularly for employers who have operations across provincial borders, would be to get pension rules in jurisdictions across the country more harmonized and in line. It would take a lot of the administrative costs away. Okay. So if I had one solution on that particular side, that's what I would offer.
Okay, thank you. I'd also like to just talk about the TFSA. Again, reading from your report, you state the take-up rate for the TFSA has to date been quite strong when compared to the more well-established RRSP. It has the potential to represent a significant addition to the basket of tax-assisted savings vehicles. You go on to say, before pursuing other reforms, it would be worthwhile to determine, 1, if the TFSA represents an addition to the RRSP or a substitute, 2, whether it increases net savings or merely replaces one form with another, and 3, whether it proves to be particularly attractive to certain family types for whom inadequate savings is a concern. Would you be able to share with us about some of the potential that you see for the TFSA as an increasingly important part of the retirement adequacy system for Canadians?
There's about 1 minute there, Mr. Campbell.
I'm going to turn to my colleague, Marion Roble, who's looked at this issue.
We do think that was a good reform. And it's a reform because it provides tax-assisted savings vehicles for a variety of reasons. You know, we have an RSP that was originally, it was a retirement savings plan, and we've made a number of modifications to it to enable people to save for a down payment for a house and all of these things. The TFSA, by its virtue, by its nature, is very flexible. It's very good for lower income families who don't have the high marginal tax rate and who may find that if they save in an RSP, when they draw that down, it's going to be taxable income that's going to be clawed back. We also like the TIFSA and the fact that if you take money out for a particular reason, you regain that tax room. So it is it's a very flexible, it's a very profound and large reform to the tax-assisted savings vehicles, and let's see how it works out, and maybe future reforms should be directed at the TIFSA.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Mr. McCallum again, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to clarify one thing with the CPPIB. I think Mr. Wallace was asking if you were currently set up to do something new, and I assume the answer to that is no. But in your statement, you say if policymakers decide to expand the CPP, we could have asked manage the additional assets, which to me that's the operative point. So would you agree with that?
Well, as I explained in my earlier answer, if it's expanding the CPP roughly in its current form, so the YMPE or the replacement rate, that's more or less similar to what we're doing. We're set up to do that, and we would accelerate our plans to handle larger asset pools. The question, I think, was in relation to a defined contribution plan, which we are not set up to do currently.
But you could set yourself up to do that if asked.
Those are the, yeah, exactly. Those are the essence of the questions that we will respond to the committee with.
Okay, thank you. That's what I wanted to know. And on the question of the advice people need in order to do defined contribution, well, I don't really understand that, because there are already in existence defined contribution plans that don't require specific advice, the so-called life cycle funds that are handled by banks. Is that not the case? Individuals don't have to seek advice if they purchase a life cycle fund.
There are funds like that, but I would say the characteristic of defined contribution, particularly over the long term, is that individuals' own risk profiles and needs are going to change, and they are going to want to be able to, and this is a characteristic of most funds, most on the defined contribution plans, I should say, is that they will want to be able to satisfy themselves that, if they're at the age of 30, they're in the right spot, but if they're age at 58,
well, that's exactly what a life cycle fund is. The investment mix is a function of your age, correct?
If the individual is comfortable with that particular fund and they have the choice to go in that is great. Okay. Our concern is if a new plan is put in place, and again, we just haven't seen the details, but if a new plan is put in place where it's automatic enrollment and because of inertia, if people don't go out of it, they may not have the choice. Or be
my point is that I think your point is a bit of a red herring, because there already exist bank-run funds which are life cycle funds, which are the investment mix being a function of the age. And I would suggest, even though it hasn't been fully worked out, that a supplementary defined contribution supplementary CPP could be modeled on exactly the same lines, and there you have it. The problem is solved. But I'd like to now return to the question of the costs and 60 basis points because I had my other source of information saying it's closer to 100. But in any event, I guess my question is, if it's 60, so much the better. You'd be even better placed to compete with a new public sector plan, because 60 is pretty low. So I guess I repeat my question, and given that we have a life cycle type plan, which the CPPIB is saying they could do if asked, and it's similar to something provided by the private sector, then to go back to my earlier question, why can't we have that and your expanded multi-employer plan, which you're asking for? Why can't the two coexist and compete with each other and offer more choice to Canadians?
I think I'll repeat what I said earlier in the sense that the two indeed could coexist, and our view is that there's absolutely nothing stopping the country from enabling multi-employer plans and auto-enrollment and all those other things and getting that going, because we really think that would help, and we should go ahead and just do that as a country. The supplementary question of whether there's a supplementary CPP setup, I think it could exist alongside, and I think you're back to the question, is it, and I guess that's what you were all debating, is that a good thing for the country? The one thing I would just observe on that, and it ties into the earlier discussion, is if it's one thing for members of our defined contribution plans to not like the investment performance, but in a year where, for example, the CPP earns a minus 18%, which does happen, and you've got a lot of Canadians in that one investment with one sponsor, I would say that I think that would be that would pose quite a challenge.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. McCallum. We'll go to Mr. Hebert, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My questions are mostly for Mr. Swedlove and Mr. Campbell. You both suggested increasing the age limit at which Canadians could withdraw from their RRSPs, or would have to withdraw from their RRSPs. And you also both suggested that allowing a lifetime pension contribution limit would be better than an annual limit. And one of you pointed to the UK as an example. I'm just wondering if you could unpack some of the implications to Canadians and to the government if those changes were adopted.
Me first, or Mr.
Sure.
Swedlove? Okay. I think on the well, let's take the lifetime one first, and maybe come back to the increased age, because I know life insurers suggested a specific age, and they may want to comment on that. I think the idea of a lifetime limit, and I don't have a fully worked out plan. I mean, there's a number of commentators who have proposed this, and it seemed to make sense. Again, is its flexibility over the life cycle. There is an element of that already in the RSPs, in the sense that you can make up contribution room, but because it's tied to employment income, when you're younger, the amounts are less. If you had a set amount, and different analysts, will say whether it's $1 million or more, what it would allow you to do, I think, is, particularly when you're in a position to make more contributions as you get older, that you can top those up. Whereas if you had that employment income-based catch-up like you do in the RSP, and you don't do it in your earlier years, you have it perhaps a smaller amount. We just think it's a more flexible way. There's a lot of people who go through the working career and they have disruptions. They're out of a job for a while, or they have a period of low income, or they're out of work or whatever. If there's an ability to do some catch-up for those people when they're in a position to do so, that might help. But I'll turn to my friends from the CLHIA.
I would agree with that point that Mr. Campbell made on the raising the age at which RIF or RRSPs and pensions need to be started. I would just observe that the age 71 limit was initially put in 1978 for RIF withdrawals, and Canadian life expectancy for men and women age 65 has increased at an astonishing rate since 1978. People are living longer, and so the additional flexibility given to Canadians to start it a little bit later, we think would be of great value to people, especially those who want to continue to work.
Do I have time for another question, Mr. Chair?
You have 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Mr. Swedlove, you also suggested expanding the definition of earned income to capture such things as royalties and active business income to be more inclusive of self-employed Canadians. Could you elaborate on that suggestion?
The expansion of the earned income definition for RRSP contributions, just to make it a little easier for self-employed Canadians whose income shows up in different ways. It doesn't necessarily show up as a salary like it does for employed Canadians. For self-employed Canadians, income shows up in the form of dividends and other forms coming back to the individual, and we're just suggesting to make it easier for them to save for retirement, we should expand that definition of earned income.
Mm-hmm. And one last question, again for you Mr. Swedlove. You mentioned that multi-employer pension plans exist. So if that's the case, what more needs to be done to help them be more effective?
I'm sorry, the multi-employer plan?
They already exist. You made reference to them as...
I should clarify that and say the multi-employer plan exists today for employers who are already connected to each other. So construction, in the construction industry as an example. What's missing is we need to change the law, or we think we're recommending to change the law to allow unaffiliated employers to band together in a multi-employer plan, which they cannot do today.
I see. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hebert. I want to thank all of the witnesses for being with us here today, for your presentations, your responses to our questions. As you can see, there are a lot of questions, so we may in fact ask you to come back at a future date on the same study. Colleagues, we have a motion by Mr. McCallum, so I will suspend the meeting for a minute or two and then ask Mr. McCallum to bring his motion forward. His motion, please. Mr. McCallum? Mr. McCallum, would you like to introduce your motion? Your
He's
motion?
not there, McCallum. Here. Being cordial to our residents.
Okay, Mr. McCallum, we have...
Do we have another list?
You should all have a copy of the notice of motion for Mr. McCallum. Mr.
Do you want me
McCallum,
to speak now while...
it's not in camera. It's It's public.
Okay.
You are on TV.
Okay. I have a motion, which you have before you, dans les deux langues officielles.
Both official languages.
The Parliamentary Budget Officer and the Department of Finance use exactly the same private sector forecasts for GDP, interest rates, inflation. But the issue involves how you go from the economist forecast to your budget revenue expenditure deficit forecasts. And so that's where the Finance Department and the Parliamentary Budget Officer disagree. That's the only source of their difference, going from the economist forecast to the budget. And the Parliamentary Budget Officer makes his assumptions. He criticizes finance for not being more transparent in terms of what they do inside that black box to move from economic forecast to budget forecast. So my proposal is that we invite two parties, the Parliamentary Budget Officer and finance officials, to come before us and each of them to explain how it is that they move from the economic forecasts to the budget forecasts. And I think, given that we have such a high deficit, it's a worthwhile exercise for the Finance Committee to hear both sides in terms of how this is done and possibly conclude that there needs to be a little more transparency or clarity out of finance in terms of how they make that transition. So that is the essence of the motion, and I don't have a precise date, but the topic is quite warm, so I would hope we might find perhaps an hour to hear both the finance officials and the Parliamentary Budget Officer in the not-too-distant future on this topic.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McCallum. I have Mr. Paillet.
We obviously support this motion, since the Minister of Finance, in responding to a question, said that the Parliamentary Budget Officer was erring as usual. I'd like to check that. And as well, we can be against this motion because there's a saying that says statistics are for economists, and what I and Mr. McCallum are, and statistics are what are like a lamppost for a drunkard.
An expression that economists have predicted 12 of the last 5 recessions as well. Monsieur Généreux, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, we cannot be against such a motion. However, we would like to have it amended or add that that economists be also invited as part of the motion. So I move that we add the following: that also be invited economists from the private sector and whose opinions are used to base departmental forecasts. There's a direct relationship between private sector economists and the government.
Recommending an amendment to also invite private sector economists.
Ça va bien, oui. Les économistes du secteur privé, franchement.
That's correct.
Mr. Wallace, please.
Yeah, from my perspective, Mr. Chair, and my colleagues across the way, Mr. McCallum talked about the transition from the economists to the and changing that he called it the black box, and changing that into budget predictions. He might be right, and I appreciate his expertise in being a former one of those people at the bank that government at one time would have called on for advice. I would like to understand if there is a difference, or if there's a transition from the private sector economists' predictions to the finance. I think it's right on inviting the finance people, and then what the parliamentary. But I think to invite 2 of the 3 pillars would be give us less information. I think, to be fair, we should hear the modeling, the system that the third-party economists, the private sector economists use to develop their predictions and their view, and how that gets transferred. But I need to understand the first part and how it's used if I'm going to understand the difference between the budget officer there. So it's really, all it would mean, I think, Mr. Chair, is that it would be a full meeting instead of a half a meeting, and we can invite some of the third-party economists to join us at the table to get their perspective.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wallace. Mr. McCallum.
Look, I'm an economist. I don't think they add anything because the two parties use exactly the same forecast. But if you want to hear the economists, I have nothing against that, except I would insist they be at separate meetings. You have the economists first, if you want the economists, and they won't add anything on this narrow issue. They might add something on other issues. And then at a separate meeting, you have these two parties. So I don't think you need to amend the motion. You just accept the motion and add something saying we'll invite economists.
I was just
earlier.
That's what the amendment does, and I was supporting the amendment.
Well, does the amendment make it clear that these are two separate meetings? You don't want to commingle the economists with the finance and parliamentary budget officer.
Point of order.
Is this a point of order, or is this continuing a discussion?
Just point of order to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, point of order, Mr. Wallace.
In terms of process, I think an order is a process question. Could you define what two separate meetings are? Could it be 1 hour of one and then a second hour of another, all included in one meeting?
Well, it's something, I mean, Mr. McCallum can clarify with his motion, but my understanding is he wants at least an hour with both the parliamentary budget officer and with officials from the Department of Finance, if I'm clear, at the same meeting.
Yes.
For an hour, at least an hour. But he would be willing to accept a second meeting, perhaps of an hour, with the economists. As long as they're separate panels.
Panels, fine, thank you.
Is that?
That was my point of order. I think that was.
That would make sense.
Might not have been, but it was a good point. Economists first. Okay, Mr. Payet.
Oui, juste pour.
Yes, just to follow a logical pattern, it would be logical to have the economists first to share their predictions with us, and then the following hour to hear from the parliamentary budget officer and people from the finance department, in that order. That's my suggestion.
I think it, yeah. So I have Mr. Jeannot and then Mr. McCallum.
Je veux juste rappeler à monsieur.
I simply want to remind Mr. McCallum and Mr. Payet that we aren't all economists here, and so all the better for them, but we're not all economists.
We're talking about finance officials on this, not the Minister of Finance, correct? Okay. I don't think the Minister would want to go there.
It was very clear, invite Department of Finance officials. So I'm sensing agreement that there's an agreement to amend the motion to have a separate panel with the economists. All in favor? All in favor of the motion as amended? Okay, thank you, colleagues. Meeting adjourned.